Welcome to the AMATIC 2018 webinar series. My name is Julie Gunkelman and I am the Professional Development Coordinator for AMATIC. Today's webinar is using research findings to make an impact in the classroom with Shandy Hauk and Ann Sitomer. Sponsoring committees today are Research in Mathematics Education in two-year colleges and Teacher Preparation. Please note that the views expressed by the presenter are not necessarily the views of AMATIC. Commercial products mentioned by the presenters are not endorsed by AMATIC. Our webinar sponsor is McGraw-Hill. Thank you very much for sponsoring our webinar series. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Ann and Shandy introduce themselves to you and take over.
I'm working on that. Hopefully now you're seeing the slides. I'm Shandy Hauk, and Ann, I hope you will say hello.
Hi there, I'm Ann.
So we're going to start with an overview of what we're doing today. We're going to do some introductions, and that's going to include you taking a little poll about where you are. We're going to talk about educational research and design using a framework of a design cycle. And then we're going to have a couple of examples, one from me and one from Ann. And then we're going to have you do a little bit of an activity. So moving along, let's do introductions. Ann?
Hi, I'm Ann Sitomer. I'm currently a visiting professor at Portland State University. I'm working on a project to improve students' experiences and learning in the large enrollment introductory math courses. And they asked me to do that because of all the years I spent teaching those courses at a community college. At AMATIC, I'm the research committee chair. I'm also a co-PI on AMATIC's Project Slope. And if you haven't heard about that yet, look in the newsletter and keep your ears open at the next conference.
I'm Shandy Hauk. I work for a think tank in San Francisco. We do research and policy and curriculum development. It's called WestEd. And I'm also a faculty member in the math department at the University of Northern Colorado. I have yet to be a community college teacher. I'm on the list to be an adjunct at a local community college here for the fall. Hopefully that'll work out. But I was a community college student. And eventually I got a PhD in math and I did a postdoc in math ed. Now I do research and development in college mathematics. Like, for example, we just did a study of how the Khan Academy is used in developmental math courses, which was very interesting. I'm happy to talk to anyone over a beer about that. And now I'm doing an NSF-funded project that's developing an online short course for faculty at associate's granting, bachelor's granting, doctoral granting institutions, the gamut. The short course for faculty is on teaching future elementary school teachers math, which is the topic of today's webinar. That's my first plug for it, and I'll plug it again at the end, because in the fall we're going to offer the course for the second time, and I'm looking for people to be my little guinea pigs to try out our course and give us feedback on the course. All right, so that's us. Where are you? So you should see a poll come up in front of you in a moment that asks you to identify which region of the country you're in. And then Ann and I should be able to see what the results are at some point. We've not done this before, so thank you for your patience.
Oh, there we go. Well, I'm from the Northwest region, but I couldn't vote.
And so you can see on your screen where we're from. So we have a nice solid representation from the Midwest. Glad to hear it. So we have another quick poll for you. What's your experience in teaching the math courses for pre-service K-8 teachers, the people who claim someday they're going to be elementary or middle school teachers? That poll should pop up in front of you in just a moment. There it goes. And then Julie will share the results.
Oh, great.
Oh, okay. So I see I have a couple of potential candidates for my project. So today's goal is to connect research to practice. And the way we want to do that is to talk about finding, interpreting, using, and reflecting on how research can inform what we try to do in the classroom. Finding's not as simple as finding a study that says, here's the formula how to teach these people. It doesn't really happen. In this webinar, we're going to share some strategies, and we're going to base those strategies on this design cycle idea, which I'm going to share in a moment. And in particular, it's important that in this connecting research to practice is evaluating the results. And taking our own advice, we're going to do the same thing today about this webinar. This is just a preview for you that at the end of the webinar, we're going to ask you some questions, and Ann and I will evaluate our success in attempting to find, use, and do stuff with research about working with adults who teach future teachers. So you don't have to do anything with these questions right now. I just wanted to let you know what they were. And so to connect research to practice, it would help for us to say what we mean by research. So now we're going to ask you to use your chat box and say, for you, what comes to mind when you hear someone say, I do research in mathematics education, or I do research in college mathematics education. Either one is fine. Go ahead, and I'll give you a couple minutes to type something in the chat box there.
Pre and post tests.
Interesting.
Other ideas? Different teaching styles. Systematically searching for an answer to questions. Outcomes of active learning.
Mm-hmm. I think you're seeing more than I'm seeing.
I only have 3 posts here.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, take a moment. Even if it's, I have no idea what it means. Go ahead and say that too. That's fine.
Okay, that's good. A good start here. Should we introduce our definition?
Our definition for the purposes of today is that research in math ed is systematic. It dives deeply into a particular aspect of teaching and or learning of mathematics. So now here's the last little poll for a while, but we have one more poll about whether the above statement, how consistent is the above statement with what you tend to think of as research in mathematics education. So even if you don't put anything in the chat box, you have something in your head, and you can say, how close? You know, go ahead and make a selection. Okay, that's fine.
Then we're somewhat on the same page.
Yes. And there's some good opportunities coming up if you agree with us, if you're aligned with us. And there's also, even if you're not that aligned with us, there's some opportunities, I think, to think about this idea of using research to inform practice for teaching future teachers using our little design cycle. So this is the cycle we're basing our thing on, and this may be familiar to you. I said the last poll was the last poll for a while, so we're not going to take a poll on this one. But so the cycle is common in engineering, it's common in curriculum development, it's common in research. And the thing we're going to focus on today, is the first 3 parts of the design cycle. So you see the whole cycle has this identifying a need, researching the need, proposing some possible solutions, and then doing some kind of implementation and testing and reflection on those solutions. So the steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that's about what we do in our classroom based on the first 3 steps. And today's focus is on those first 3 steps. And so I'm going to give an example of something that was in my experience of me doing step 1 and kind of moving into step 2. And then Anne's going to talk about briefly her step 1 and then moving into steps 2 and 3. So first, identify the need. I was going to teach a future K-8 teachers math course, math for future elementary teachers. And I wanted to make it relevant to them. And I realized in order to make it relevant to them, I needed to learn something. I needed to learn something about what the work was my students would do when they became teachers in K-8 classrooms. So identify the need doesn't mean it's just one need. It could be several connected needs. So I'm going to ask you to be a little reflective right now. Think about a course you've recently taught, perhaps, and you've identified a need, or you're about to teach, and you can identify something you need, either as an instructor or as a learning need to do better in the instruction. All I'm asking you to share in the chat box right now is the name of the course. If you call it Math 441, I'm not going to know what that means. But if you call it Math for Future Teachers, I will know what it means. So the name of the course, and a professional challenge that's an opportunity for you to learn something to deal with the professional challenge. A professional challenge could be anything. It could be huge. It could be tiny. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, which is longer than perhaps you think. So Anne and I are going to be quiet for 2 minutes while you think about that. Type something in the chat box. I'll use my iPhone timer. There's the timer. So I realize now that unless you purposely choose to post to all panelists and other attendees, only Anne and Julie and I are seeing what you're saying. So that's fine. I just wanted to let you know if you wondered why you weren't seeing it.
Well, but thank you.
Because I noticed that Jose Maria's were showing up in the chat for everybody, but I'm seeing a bunch of stuff, but it's not everyone's not seeing it. So Anne, will you go ahead and do a little quick qualitative coding of the kinds of things we're seeing there?
Well, we're all thinking about different courses. Some of the questions come from being new to teaching a course. Others are questions about trying new pedagogies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I noticed that Anne had one about how to shift from talking about accumulation as area, but as quantity with contextual meaning in calculus.
I'm currently struggling with.
Pre-calculus. The whole inquiry-based activities is actually one of the things that my example is about. So the first example was, for me, I had identified making my course relevant to pre-service elementary teachers, and then understanding the work that they would do, because I was thinking I could create some opportunities in the classroom for them to be learners like their students would be learners, but on a higher mathematical, sort of a deeper mathematical level for them as teachers. And I wasn't sure how to do that. So I moved into step 2 of researching the need. And so today when we're talking about resources, there are resources for teaching future K-8 teachers, but there are similar resources for teaching pre-calculus or for teaching calculus that are involve either looking at how high school is taught or how college is taught. And there are other practitioner kinds of things we'll talk about at the end that touch on that. For me, in my step 2, one of the things I found out about from one of my students was something called the teaching channel. And the teaching channel has a lot of video posted from classrooms of people actually doing teaching and kids doing learning. And then very valuable to me were the reports from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. They have several different magazines. One's Teaching Children Math, and the other's Math Teaching in the Middle School. They have a high school one as well. And these are reports on research-informed practice. So the people who read these magazines, the Math Teaching Children Math and Math Teaching in the Middle School, the people who read these magazines are people like me who want to learn more about how K-12 teachers teach, but it's also K-12 teachers read these. So these are what are called practitioner magazines. So they're very accessible, and Anne's example actually talks about some of the content of those magazines. But those are kind of some of the resources I looked at. I also looked at these resources, which are original research as opposed to research sort of distilled and connected to practice. So state and national standards like the Common Core standards are some of the things that I looked at. And I looked at these journals. There are lots of journals that have research in math ed, but these are the ones that I found especially useful for me. And it was funny because I found out I'm what's called a math teacher educator. I don't know, maybe everybody already knew that, but I didn't know that researchers who published in the Journal of Math Teacher Education called someone like me, who had a degree in math but was teaching future teachers, a math teacher educator. Because the person I was teaching would someday teach math to somebody else. I thought that a math teacher educator was someone who taught future secondary teachers. But it includes K-8 as far as these journals are concerned. So I put those out there as possible resources, and we'll have a list of links for you later if you want links to these. So this is an example of me going through from step one, identifying my need, and then looking for the resources so I could research the need or problem of how do I make things relevant to my future students. So I had to find out what their context was. Now Anne's going to talk about her trip through this cycle. From step one to step two and into step three with a little more detail.
Thanks, Shandy. So when I was first thinking about teaching a course for pre-service K-8 teachers, I realized that there must be content beyond just how to do the elementary mathematics. That was the content of our textbook. And so that was my instructional need, and I realized that I had to learn more about how the mathematics that my students as future teachers need to know and how they need to know it in order to teach it. So I identified my instructional need and my learning need. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I dove into some of the resources to research this need. So I didn't really know where to begin. But I went to the mathematics teachings in the middle schools page on the NCTM website. And that article, as Shandy was saying, is read by practitioners or teachers of middle school mathematics. But the authors are often, the articles are often based on research conducted by the authors. So we are getting research and findings in these journals. One of the things I noticed is that every issue makes available one article that's free. You have a free preview of it. So even if you don't have a subscription, you're still able to look at the article. So I found an article, and actually it was about a classroom for pre-service K-8 teachers. And it was an article on learning how to use mistakes effectively. And I chose this article based on a conversation I'd had with a colleague who told me that she uses students' mistakes in her classes with pre-service teachers. And I was very skeptical about doing that because I didn't want my pre-service teachers learning how to make mistakes. So I decided to read this article. And these are some of the things I learned.
Very brave, by the way, Anne, that you were willing to think about how to let students make mistakes.
Yes. So as I read the article, actually was a classroom, an illustration of a classroom with pre-service K-8 teachers. And I was really impressed by the mathematical work they were doing. They were working on an elementary problem around proportional reasoning, but they were bringing a lot of different ways of thinking to bear on it. And the article was about the instructor of the course's decisions in choosing mistakes to help move the pre-service teachers' learning along as well. And really the big thing I learned is that there's a lot of different types of mistakes, and some of them are more useful in moving learning forward than other mistakes. So here's kind of an example. So this is the problem that the students were working on. They had to make purple paint, and pink paint is made from equal parts of white and red paint. And then powder blue paint is made from 3 parts blue paint to 1 part white paint. And purple paint is made with equal parts of the powder blue and the white. And
Pink,
thank you. So an example of a good mistake to choose for instruction would be where students were making connections. They were understanding the relationships between the parts, but not connecting the parts to the whole. And I realized when I'm teaching my course for pre-service teachers, that's the type of mathematics that they need to understand and know how to do in order to teach. Being able to distinguish that in this problem, there are part-part and part-whole relationships. They gave an example of a not very good mistake, which would be a mistake where a student didn't know that 4 quarts equaled 1 gallon. You can't do the problem without knowing that. But that wouldn't move the learning forward. That would probably be a mistake that you just want to address with an individual student. So really understanding how pre-service teachers need to know it was a really big takeaway from this article. Okay, and so this is another thing that I realized is that when I was reading the article, not expecting to be seeing a class with pre-service teachers, I realized that I'm going to be learning along with my students. As I learn how to choose illustrative mistakes, I'm going to be modeling that for my teachers too. So I'm starting to think about moving into step 3, some things I can possibly do to support the type of learning that the future teachers will need to teach.
Right.
The type of mathematical learning. So from here, it's like, okay, so I read this one article, but I want to read more. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of following a thread. So as I read this article, I started getting a handle on something I hadn't thought about before, which is mathematical knowledge for teaching. And I got a vague sense of what that might mean. Like I have to know different types of mathematics to choose examples as illustrative, mistakes as illustrative examples than just teaching the proceedings. So I was reading the bio of the first author, and this turns out to be the area where he does his research. So I decided to look for another article by that author, which was cited in the article I read. So that's often a good way to get from one paper to another to learn more about your topic of interest.
I will interject here briefly. It's also a really good way to go down a fascinating tunnel into a rabbit hole, out of which one can spend years getting back out. And that's what happened to me in my postdoc. But it was very interesting years.
Good. So the second article I selected to research more about my instructional and learning need was this article that's listed here about moving up and forward, moving up and moving backwards in fractional understanding. So here I learned what the authors meant by that is if you're posing a problem to a class, all the students are in different places in terms of their readiness to engage with the problem. So some students will need to step back a little bit and some students will need to be pushed forward. And part of the mathematical work of being a teacher involves understanding what a simpler mathematics problem or understanding what a more complex mathematics problem might be. And I have an example here that the kinds of things that teachers will need beyond just knowing the elementary mathematics. So in this particular problem, the students were asked to measure out 2.5 cups of sugar using a measuring scoop that's 1/3 of a cup. And where students are going to struggle typically with a problem like this is how to measure out 1/2 cup of sugar using a 1/3 cup scoop. And so one of the things I learned from reading this article is that the teachers, my students who are going to be teachers, are going to have a lot of different varieties of models, because when students get stuck, one model might help them get past that point rather than another model. So one example of stepping backwards or moving backwards is understanding different ways to represent fractions and using those as tools for moving students' learning forward when they're stuck. So now, kind of going back and making some connection between the ideas, I'm going back to my goals. What mathematical content do the students need to know beyond doing elementary math? And what mathematics will they need to know and how will they need to know it? And I think one of my big takeaways from both articles is that there's a connection between my students' mathematical knowledge and the instructional decisions they can make as teachers. So the more I can build up the type of mathematical knowledge that will help them make instructional decisions, that's some of the mathematics beyond just doing the elementary math. So I'm starting to answer some of my questions a little. There's still a lot more to do in the design cycle. So we're going to back away from us talking, and we're going to do an activity. Shed, you want to?
Sure. So the idea here is in a moment, we're going to put in the chat box some links to 4 resources. And we're limiting it to 4 because otherwise it would just be really difficult to choose. So earlier you talked about a challenge you had. And so here are 4 different resources. There's the MAA Instructional Practice Guide that talks about teaching college, and it includes specifically teaching particular courses in college. There's also the Mathematics Educator, which is the journal that comes out of AMATIC. And then there's the Journal for Math Teacher Education, or of Math Teacher Educators, the JMTE. And then IJ Room was the International Journal for Research in Undergraduate Math Ed. I think somewhere on a slide I have that all spelled out. But those links will be showing up in your chat box in a moment, I hope, Julie. If I'm supposed to put them in there, let me know. And so we're going to ask you to spend 5 minutes, choose one link, thinking about your challenge, and just look at the tables of contents, and if you have access to abstracts, look at the abstract. See if you can find 1, maybe 2 things that are of interest that would give you some insight or take you forward in some way in understanding your challenge. So this is an activity for you to do now. It's going to take you 5 minutes or so. There are some links. The first one is the MAA Instructional Practices Guide. The second one is the Mathematics Educator. The third one is JMTE. And the fourth one will be the IJ Room, I think. And you'll need to go out of full screen mode if you haven't already. So remember, that's up in that little bar at the top of your screen so that you can click a link and go out to the browser. I think if you click it, it might disappear behind the presentation you're looking at right now. So I'll set my timer for 5 minutes, and when you come back, this is what I'm going to ask you to do, to say what resource you explored and what title caught your interest and how it might help you research your need in the chat box. You set my if you have a question or clarification, go ahead and put it in the chat box. We'll answer you, I swear. Setting my timer. So that's my little timer going off. So take a minute to type something into the chat box. Either you got something or you're still looking. I know we only gave 4 links, so they may not have been pertinent to what you were doing. And I suspect we have a more sophisticated audience than we anticipated here because of the kinds of challenges they reported and the kinds of things they're saying they find interesting, which is good. That's really good.
Yeah, no, there are definitely some interesting things out in IJ Room that Keith and I saw. Mm-hmm. And I like that a lot of people looked at the MAA Instructional Practices Guide to find some links to possible ideas.
Yeah, that's what I had responded to Jose Maria, because I think that happens too, is that sometimes a policy-like document like that MAA document can give you a bunch of references to go look at. So it's not necessarily going to tell you what you want.
But it's organized though around teaching and practice. Yeah. So I noticed that people were looking at things like, where was it? Inquiry-based teaching and just-in-time teaching, which are things that our problems of practice are posed around.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. All right. So we just want a really quick poll, and like I said, you may be so sophisticated, so it doesn't really matter. But here's our poll. How easy was it to find something of interest in that research the need kind of area? Julie will put the poll up in a second. What do we got, Julie? Is everyone voting? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And it looks like everybody found something of interest, which is really great for 5 minutes.
Okay. So back to the design cycle. Now we've only talked about steps 1, 2, and 3. 4 through 8 are an exercise left to the viewer because that's actually
right. It's all about taking what we've learned and thinking about something to design for our classroom.
Right.
To make
and then revisiting,
mm-hmm.
because it is a cycle.
Yep.
Right. I don't want to leave the impression that I only do this once. I come back after I try something and I say, okay, I need to refine my problem or refine my need and look for something new. And that's kind of in a mini cycle that Anne was reporting. She had kind of done that. She had refined, well, I think I need to know more about math knowledge for teaching. And then she researched that more particularly.
Yep.
So there can be little sub-cycles in this. So now our goal is to, we said at the end we would monitor progress. So I want to thank you, and now I want to give you an opportunity. If you have questions or comments, use the chat box to type them in, and if there's something you want to have a conversation offline about, that's fine. Or if you would like to have a conversation about it in the chat box right now, that's fine too. After this slide, I'll go to promoting my study again, and then we'll go out to the survey stuff. Julie will take over and lead us into surveys. Please hang on, because I want to promote and I want the surveys. So the chat box will continue to remain active, so you can put stuff in there. Here's Anne's and my contact information. So my project is doing this field test this fall. I'm actively soliciting information for people who are interested in doing this. It's a short course. It's 15 hours across the course of the semester. People who are faculty members come into this short course. It's an online short course. And some of it's real time and some of it's asynchronous, and you're matched with a partner. If you don't already have a colleague at your college, you're matched with somebody, and you talk with each other about some 2 or 3 problems of practice, little activities that you try out in your class, and you read some stuff about the kinds of things that are involved in teaching future teachers. And so if you're interested, please email me and I can send you more information. And I think now Julie will wrap up and provide a link to our survey. We wanted to make sure we left time for you to do the survey within the time. Oh, that's okay, Jose. Jose Maria. Tell me someone who does. Okay, go ahead, Julie.
Goodness. Thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. If you'd like to support future AMATIC webinars, please consider becoming a member of AMATIC. You can go to bit.ly/join-AMATIC. We are on Facebook, other social media as well, Instagram and Twitter. Your regional page, your vice president of your region would love for you to join their page. That would be awesome as well. If you can't figure that out, let me know and I'll hook you up. We do have, it takes about a week or 2 to get the videos of the recordings uploaded, so you can get them all at bit.ly/AMATIC-webinars. So the survey, the illustrious survey that Shandy was talking about. So we combined, because they wanted to do a survey and I have to do a survey for AMATIC. We're going to just have a one-stop shop, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat window when I'm done talking. The first thing that you're going to see is their survey. So this is what Anne and Shandy, a part of their presentation was to evaluate. That's what you're going to see. And then to get to the typical AMATIC survey that we always have at the end of the webinars, you're going to click this button, and she replaced done with go to AMATIC survey, and then you're going to see our typical AMATIC survey there. I don't see anything in the question and answer box. If you guys have questions before we let them off the line, you probably want to put them in there.
Well, I'm willing to hang on here for another 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. No problem.
But please go do the survey. Go do.
Definitely go do the survey. So I just went ahead and launched that link. I'm going to stop recording, but please feel free to stay on. They're happy to answer your questions. I don't see anything coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.